All right, what is good? Welcome to the We Are One podcast. Like always, it's Justin here. I'm very excited to jump in with this guest today. I appreciate you taking out the time of your busy schedule to come chat with us.
Hey,
welcome,
thanks for having me.
welcome to the show, Matt Allen.
Hey, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is a beautiful space. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, we're lucky to. Thanks, Alba, for allowing us to use your student card here at the U, and we jump into one of these shared office spaces. I'm excited to chat with you. Early on in the summer during the protests and whatnot, we connected a couple times over at Modest, and I knew we were gonna have some form of working relationship, as it seems. So it's cool to finally get
movement.
Man. Happy belated birthday too, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Dude, you're 30.
I'm 30 years old. It was honestly a wild, I didn't even think I'd get this far. So that's crazy. I am very blessed.
Yeah. I would never have imagined that you were 30 too.
Yeah. I mean, I don't dress 30 or act 30.
Yeah.
My fiance tells me that she's like, you're still pretty much 16. And I'm like, that's fair.
Age is absolutely just a number.
It's it's arbitrary.
It's about your mindset.
Exactly right.
I think that's easy to say as a 24-year-old, but at the same time, I'm confident and hopefully I'll be able to stay.
I think it's just a matter of where it is. Age doesn't necessarily define maturity. We've all seen, people who are much older than the both of us combined acting the fool, like acting childish. That's just kind of how it is. So we live in a world where as long as you're it's weird that we say that you get older when you get less happy. You know what I mean?
As you get older, you get
less happy, and then you say you acting older, and you act like a child. It's because you love what you're doing.
Yeah, that is weird.
It's weird.
I agree, and I think it's almost like it's just a weird mindset for it seems like complacency or something just like letting yourself settle into routine and status quo, and then it's like
there's no reason for that. So for me, I'm always like, oh man, you don't seem this old. I'm like, I seem happy. I seem like I love the things that I get to love. I have people around me that I care for, so I get to express that in a more positive way, and thus I seem younger. Because the younger you are, the less things you have to worry about.
Part of what makes me get like that young vibe off of you too is I think the energy that you're constantly offering forward, right? Where it seems like as people get older, they give off this like more tired vibe too. And it seems as if you always have something to offer in the space of like inspiration and excitement and motivation.
Life is like life. There's a lot of places to find excitement and motivation, and I like to ride that wave. I like to be in that space as much as I can. Obviously, I get tired, I get low, like everybody does. Everybody does that. But at the same time, it's one of those things. It's like, hey, if I can find something in my day that'll give me a smile, I'm gonna try to hang on to that as long as I can.
Hell yeah,
that's what it's all about.
That's great. I love that. And sometimes I'm like, for myself personally, I feel like sometimes I'm like stubborn to it. I'm in a shit mood and I kind of want to stay in that shit mood where like something makes me smile and I'm just like closed off to it. I'm like, nah, we ain't about that right now or whatever the feeling is.
Yeah. I've challenged myself to think of something that makes me laugh when I'm angry or sad. Because you can't do both.
Right.
You can't truly be happy. You can't truly laugh and be angry or laugh and be sad in the same instance. It can be back and forth really quickly, but to get yourself in that mode, to allow yourself to feel all your emotions when they come, not when you want to feel a certain thing, like that stubbornness. I feel that sometimes, I'm going to be mad. I'm angry. I'm going to be angry, but I'll watch something that I find funny and I'll be like, that was funny. I can still laugh at that. That doesn't stop being funny just because I'm upset about something.
I'm in a shit mood, right? Yeah, I think that's super important and positive. Babe.
Oh.
Is my phone on?
Oh, snap. The phone.
The phone locked.
The phone locked, but we're still here.
So if you're on YouTube, you just got a blank screen.
Well, that's okay.
Momentarily.
Just imagine how handsome we are.
So beautifully handsome.
It's not hard to do.
I love, that's one thing that stood out. I'm thinking right away, I think maybe because it's fresh and I just watched it today. I'm thinking about your TED Talks video.
Yeah.
And one of the things that always stands out to me too is like one comment you made right as you started is like, hopefully I'm up here looking hot or whatever like that. And I feel like that's consistent for you. Like that's something you're always referring to.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta call it, man. I call it out because first off, I don't think dudes, men specifically, male identifying people, I don't feel like we talk enough about our need to be physically attractive. I don't think we talk about that nearly enough, and it causes insecurity in a lot of male identifying people.
And like competition, right?
They want to feel beautiful. They want to feel desired in that way, but because they don't allow themselves to express that or to talk about that or even give themselves self-affirmation, it tends to come out in trying to control other people, and usually. Because men have been in positions of power most often, it tends to be in controlling women and how they look.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just like, nah, dude, like I'm hot. I'm gonna talk about it. And I'm gonna say it even when I don't feel like that way, because it's just like speak things that aren't as though they are, and that's what I live my life by. So even though it is, you already know.
That's a token for you right there, and I think that speaks to just like that, you know. Kind of like that, I don't know what we'd call it, like a masculine insecurity, something like that. But that also speaks to something else you mentioned in that TED Talks speech. Would you refer to it as speech?
Yeah, it's like they call it a talk.
Okay.
They call it a TEDx talk. It's a talk.
It's less formal than a speech.
It's not a speech, it's not a lecture. It's more of just like a talk.
It's a talk.
Yeah.
That feels more personable and inviting.
I think that's why they call it that. You know what I mean? It's like, no, dude, just talk. We just talking.
Another thing you referred to in that talk was the need for emotional strength. That was something I definitely wanted to talk more about. I'm curious to get some more of your thoughts around that idea.
I think a lot of times, but we're seeing now in the last 4 years, not to push it onto any particular like political thing, but just in general, we've been seeing as we've been more connected. So I guess I should even say, as soon as we started getting social media, really, we've been noticing that people, at least I've been noticing that people are emotionally weak. And not to say that people are bad. It's just that the emotions that they are able to carry at any given time is not enough to sustain the pressures of those emotions. There's a funny line from Peter Pan. Fairies are so small they can only feel one thing at a time. You know what I mean? And I feel like some people are out there, they got that kind of heart in them. So when they're angry, if they're really angry, they can't hold that and like really see all facets of that their anger is stemming from sadness or loneliness or desire to belong or any of this other stuff that's happening. They can only hold the anger. And so because they're not strong enough to carry all that comes with it, so they focus on the one thing they can carry.
And it's like the more reactionary side to the emotion.
It's easier.
It's easier to succumb to or experience
or express.
And express it, absolutely.
So like we've been seeing that more often just because we're more connected. We see more people's reaction to things, and we can just right off the bat, everything's made really easiest for be like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that at all, so I'm just going to get it off of me because I can't handle it. I'm not strong enough to hold it. So yeah, telling people, hey, emotional strength is important. Learn to be wrong. Just to be wrong, and the guilt that comes with being wrong is not all consuming. You won't die. It won't end you. Because we've been taught to be right above all else.
Because we talk so much about IQ and like that informative factual intelligence. We don't. I completely agree, and this is why I wanted to bring it up, is because I've thought this for a couple of years now since we started podcasting. When I first started, it was with my friend who's a nurse practitioner, psychiatrist. So like a lot of our conversations were just about psychology and mental health, right? And that was one thing that we kind of, I think, talked about quite a bit, was just that there is that low EQ, that low emotional intelligence, like you just described. And you know, I retweeted this video. I think it was just like this morning, maybe last night, but it was another one of the videos of just like a person on the street, like clearly having like a mental health crisis. They were, you know, emotionally outpouring something that they don't seem to have any control of or understanding of. And I retweeted it and just said like, all right, like now I know for sure, like the United States has a mental health crisis. Like,
yeah,
because it was, we've seen a ton of those videos, but this one seemingly like just set me over the edge. Like I had a bucket that was just filling up, and then this video, like it started overflowing. And I'm like, all right, this is something to be concerned about at this point.
I think that more people need to really step back and look at the fact that, look at what's happening. Just look at the rhetoric that people are using with each other. Look at the rhetoric you're using. Even I'm using. Like all the time I think about it, I go like, our emotions are so fragile right now. We're out here and some people are having a really tough time and there's nowhere to turn for that because we haven't been putting the importance on our EQ, our emotional intelligence, and our ability to handle these extreme feelings that we're having. We haven't put an emphasis, especially not in kids, especially not in male identifying kids. More than any, like on a regular basis, there's like, hey, don't do that. Don't feel like that.
I had a really sad moment the other day. I was sitting in the hot tub at the gym and I was just minding my own business, like chilling. And I happened to see this like probably like 5 or 6, maybe 7-year-old boy crying next to the pool. And it really irritated me to see the way his dad reacted to that little boy crying. It was just, straight up finger in the face, like scowling look. I don't even know if that's a word, but I feel like you get what I'm saying. And just quit crying. It's like, damn, he's probably crying for a reason. Give the boy a hug.
Yeah, just let him and feel the emotion he's feeling. Try to figure out where it's stemming from, because that's the kind of stuff that leads to worse stuff down the road. People try to fill those feelings with things or people, and it tends to then boil over into some of the worst parts of our humanity. Is this denouncing of our emotions in lieu of doing other stuff or having other things. For real. Yeah. I know you guys.
Why does it keep blocking?
I think it's because we're getting too real.
We're getting too real.
We're getting too real for the camera.
Now Apple's on that censorship.
Apple's not ready for that. They're just like, hey, you're trying to wake people up.
I use a remote like webcam viewer, so my phone is just the webcam, and they just updated the app today. So I'll bet you that's what the issue is.
See, I'm telling you right now, Apple's trying to tell you guys not to feel they want to.
I think that the update on this app that I'm using to do the webcam it's not keeping it from locking. They messed something up with the update, so you might just have to keep unlocking it for me or tapping the screen every now and then. Thanks, babe.
That's amazing. Way to help out.
I appreciate you. So we kind of dove just like right in, but I guess for people that don't know anything about Matt Allen.
Yeah.
Matt Allen has had an eventful summer.
It's been crazy.
To say the least. I got some. So it's been busy. You've been involved. You got Justice Frontline Aid.
Yup. Shout out to JFA.
That you founded.
Yes.
This summer. The tremendous effort accepting and redistributing donations out of Modest.
Yep.
And that's kind of what JFA was birthed out of. Is that right?
So JFA started actually in the parking lot of Target outside of the 3rd precinct.
That's right.
We were there right after the 26th. So the 27th we were out there doing first aid basically throughout the entirety of that time, that uprising that was located right over there. Because I had gone out there to help out with one of my friends who's now the current president of JFA. And she had left already. They had Deshawn.
She's been on twice now. So if anyone's been following the podcast, you're familiar with the name Deshawn.
Deshawn, my girl, the amazing Deshawn. Super, super awesome. Go watch anything that she's in because she's incredibly powerful. But so we went to go check. I went to go help with her. She had left. So we were going to drop off some things and just be gone, and we were brought over to this whole bunch of medical supplies that had just been left by the medics when the fire started. And looking upon that parking lot and looking upon everything that was around there, I was like, well, I can't leave. It's one of those things. When I was one of my favorite comic book characters is Spider-Man, and I always tell people one of the first scriptures I ever read was in Amazing Fantasy issue number 1. when Uncle Ben said, "With great powers comes great responsibility." And it translated to me, it was just like, yo, power equals responsibility. Great, small power equals responsibility. And if you have the ability to do something, you have a responsibility to help. And so I was like, well, I'm here. I can do something, so I'm gonna. And so that night we were there. We cleaned up that area as best we could. We used a reappropriated, that's my legal term, a reappropriated Target cart to put a first aid stuff on it. And
do you by chance remember seeing me in that?
Yeah, I do. I remember. Yeah, we were out there.
I have a nice clip of you from that night where I was just I don't know about nice, but it just real clear as to what you guys were doing and what the objective was. Yeah. And you did everything you described in that clip too, like perfectly. I'll have to send it to you.
No, that's what up. So we were just hanging out, making sure that people were okay as best we could. And the next day we came back with a little bit more of a game plan, a little bit more of a design. We held that place down pretty well. That whole day, we saw a lot of craziness that first day. Like people getting stabbed, people with guns, like cops shooting people in the face, a bunch of different stuff. We held it as far as we could, and we had to eventually abandon that spot. And that's when we started working out of Modest through the day, and then going out at night and being out for just night first aid as best as we could. And yeah, Justice Frontline Aid was birthed out of both the daytime, giving out donations, getting them to different food shelves if we needed to, get them to the families specifically, because that's the other thing. I don't think people even understand how different our foods are. Like real talk, different communities eat different things.
Definitely.
And like different communities eat different things, whether that be religious reasons or just dietary needs or all sorts of things. They just eat different things, and sometimes it's just not something that people think about when they're going out and being like, oh, I'm going to donate food for this disaster thing. They just think, well, everybody eats what I eat. You know what I mean? And a lot of times that's not true. Most of the time it's not true. And so being able to be a voice to be like, hey, we really need non-pork products really badly. Like, because these people need this, we need these type of cooking oils because this is the kind of cooking oil that this community uses. This is the kind we need. Being able to be that voice directly to people was nice, because sometimes food shelves just take whatever they can get, but we take a lot of time. We took a lot of time to make sure we asked for specific things. Yeah. And then sometimes we would get them out to families, like individual families specifically. There's some places around the cities at that time, with everything that was going on with COVID, even they weren't taking cash from people. And so there's a lot of people who either undocumented or just haven't got a chance to get out and get bank accounts and stuff like that only use cash. And so we were able to get like cards for them so they could buy groceries, so they could buy the things they wanted. So that was good. There's a lot of different things that we were able to do during that time where we were really focusing on the food distribution while grocery stores were gone. The grocery stores were gone, and the stores were gone over in that area and areas around it. So yeah, it was really dope.
Besides the businesses that got like destroyed, looted, or burnt down, or a lot of them were also shut down for that bit of time too.
That's what I was telling people. It was a perfect storm for something like this. Not to get into all of the intricacies of why riots happen or why things happen or all stuff like that's not really my place. But I can say that economically, when you take a disenfranchised area and you put them in a pandemic, and then things are already going to be tough. The people were just tight already, and losing a lot of places where people would even go get the things that they needed. A lot of these people didn't have the means to go out further into a different community and try to buy these things. They were already strapped as tight as they possibly could have been. And the idea of them traveling all over the place and all over a place that they've never been before with people they don't know was not a good idea, especially during a pandemic. So like the abilities of all the different food shelves that were really stepping up, the people in the communities in that area that were organizing food and distribution and things like that was so essential during that time.
It was so needed. And I'm remembering a lot of the conversation at the time about how like the tactics, from potentially some of the extremist groups that were active at this time were very intentional in targeting the supply locations and the food supply locations, the grocery stores. I mean, we can even talk all the way back to how the riots got provoked.
Yep.
Right. And it's not to, disregard all the variables and systemic bias and all these things that led up to the riot even being of potential, but then also the agent provocateur that lit it up.
Yeah,
I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, no, the guy is Umbrella Man. People have been talking about him since the day it happened. There were people out there who were doing this on purpose to make things worse. There were times when we were working out in the city, walking around, that we found things of just accelerant left next to piles of bricks. Someone had put them there. You know what I mean? No one in the community is taking the time to do that, but they wanted to make sure that if something were to pop off, they made sure that it was going to be more than it probably would have been if it wasn't. There were people out there that had an invested interest in making things worse. And in those first days, it was a lot worse because nobody was looking for that. So they could get in and out with impunity. I remember there was... I'll tell a story, which I don't tell the story often, but I'll tell a story because I think it shows kind of how the cycle was. So we're outside of the Target parking lot. Two people get in a fight. These people are just doing stuff. A lot of stuff happened in that night, but one of the things that happened in that fight was a young girl got hit in the back of the head with an ice scraper. So she went down pretty hard. So we had our nurse and we had our different medics and other medics from other teams showed up and to help. And unfortunately, at that point, we didn't have the facilities to get her out of there. So we had to call 911 and ask them to bring an ambulance, and they wouldn't. So they ended up bringing what we asked them not to bring, which was a whole lot of cops. We specifically asked them, don't do that because we're right outside of Third. People are going to turn around from the building and come over here. The last thing we need is a group of people angry at you stopping this girl from getting help. I know it's blacked out because this is super serious, but you can still hear me.
Yeah, babe.
So we were out there, right? And the cops show up, lights, sirens, the whole nine, everything we asked them not to do. So people started coming in to yell at them, and rightfully so. They're angry at the cops, And this girl's on the ground, bleeding from her head, scared. You know what I mean? And the cops come over to, get this girl into the back of another squad car so they could take her out of there. And a young white male from somewhere shows up and pushes the cop as hard as he can. The cop then responds in anger, and he starts stomping over to the kid to essentially beat the crap out of him, whatever he was going to do. But what the cop didn't see is that he was about to trample over this girl that he had come here to help. I had to jump in front of the girl in between the cop and the male who ran off and explain to the cop, I look in his eyes with my hands up, not knowing if I was going to get wrecked or whatever, and say, like, he's not worth it. He's not why you're here. And, like, pointing down to the girl that his boot almost crushed the neck of. He wasn't even looking. And that's the cycle of the agitators and the cops and the people caught in the crossfire. Because that kid, whoever that kid was, and he might not have been like a professional agitator, but the concept was that white kid who was not getting choked out by the police pushed this police officer, and then the police officer used that action to almost hurt another person because he was now afraid. And then it's a cycle because that girl who was bleeding out, who needed help, that was who he was originally there for. And I will go so far as to say I think a lot of people who go into some version of law enforcement or who honestly think that they're there to help people. But what happens to them as they over time is these agitators push them. So they go to respond in force. And when they do that, they trample over the people that they've come here to help. And it is a cycle that continues on and on and on and on, and so many people get hurt because of that.
I think that's such a great story, I think, to illustrate that exact point. And I hope people really hear that for what you're sharing there, because I mean, there's a lot of variables, but for one, I think it's important to talk about how that kid just ran off.
Yeah. He just pushed the cop and left.
Like, if you're so passionate about being violent and putting your hands on this police officer, why are you running away?
What are you doing? And that's one of the things we've been saying the entire time. And you can hear people saying that even when they took the 3rd originally. Because right on the 26th, when people had marched over to the 3rd, and it was a peaceful protest at the beginning, and then people decided to be more like destructive with their protests, which that's a moral conversation for a different time. But like, they would break a window and then they'd all scatter. And then you had people walking through them. It's like, why are you running? This you wanted to do this. This is the thing.
If you're so about it, be
then
about
just
it.
Be about it. Yeah. Be about it. There is a different conversation to be had about someone who decides to destroy a cop car and then gets arrested for doing so. Kneels down and puts his hand behind his back, or her hand behind her back, or whatever, and gets arrested because they wanted to do what they knew was the right thing to do, and someone who wanted to just start problems. And that's a big difference.
There's absolutely, I think, language that needs to be kind of deciphered to some degree to describe some of these people. And I think I might have talked about it in the last podcast, but there's a difference between like rioters, demonstrators, protesters, opportunists, agitators, provocateurs. Like, there's a lot of people out acting with different, intent.
Yeah.
And there's not, this one thing that I found myself doing really early on, and that was why I kept finding myself at Modest trying to communicate with you, and the operation you guys had going there was like trying to align intentions or help people align intentions. Because if, we have a protest that is turned into a riot from agitators, right? And that's, they're co-opting like the intent of the protest originally in a lot of sense. And that conversation could go really deep because, peaceful protests, if you're just there protesting and it becomes emotional because you're confronting the 3rd precinct, the people that are responsible for the event that you're protesting, like there's a lot there, but I think there's absolutely language that needs to be used to kind of decipher between the different intentions.
And I think the lack of language is purposeful.
Right.
I think the lack of language is purposeful. The news says, "Oh, protesters and rioters."
That's a great point.
They'll make sure to lump everybody into the same time. They want everyone to equate one with the other. It's the same reason with advertising. It's the same reason advertising why you think crunchy potato chips. Why? Because they say them together over and over and over and over and over again. You'll think crunchy potato chips. You'll think
we're at that
this
point
brand
now.
this brand is this, or this. You think Subway. The first thing you think is Eat Fresh. Why? Because they say it right after it all the time. So like when they say protesters, rioters.
Riot.
They'll say peaceful protest, violence. They'll say it right back to back, so that when you listen, you'll hear those things and you'll think they're together, but they're not together. And not to say that a violent protest is any less valid. It's just that there are different things happening at different times. There are different things happening in the same place at the same time. And to say that all of these people are together is not true. But it's easier for their narrative to say that everybody's together. It's easier for their narrative to say that anybody who throws
okay.
Oh, sweet. Look at you. You're killing the game.
Thanks, baby.
Everybody who is a part of everybody who's in a crowd is responsible for any one action of those people in that crowd. The same criticism that they won't label to the people who are trained to do a particular thing. It's the reason why, if I walked into a store and somebody else was robbing the store, I'm not considered a robber. But if somebody was rioting while people were protesting around them, everybody is rioting.
Right.
It's purposeful. It's
Definitely.
By design, which should tell people kind of why I always say follow where they don't want you to see. It's like when you're trying to catch a magician's trick. They're going to put a lot of flair around where they want you to look, and it'd be more interesting to find where they don't want you to look.
Mm-hmm. And so when in this type of discussion, like where are some places that you look for information outside of the mainstream? Who do you rely on for that?
Well, a lot of things is actually just getting to know the people in which you're trying to talk to or talk about or learn about. A lot of these people will tell you. A lot of these communities will talk. Honestly, local newspapers, like local like bulletins, stuff like that, are sometimes a lot more real than a national news source just because they live there. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably a really great way. If you want to know about a community, there are communities that just have community things on their Facebook. Type in a city that you want to know more about. Type in, a town or a street or a neighborhood. And there's probably a northeast something Facebook that you could at least 7 of them that you can look at and see what some of these people who live there are talking about. Mm-hmm. That's a great way to learn about stuff. There are other podcasts for sure. There are like news organizations that aren't crazy biased one way or the other. Like, honestly, the BBC is a little much, but like you can listen for things outside of America and listen to how they talk about us. You'll find a lot more unbiased opinion because they don't have to sleep there. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
I do like the idea of like tapping in directly to the community for the information, right? Like when the protests were or I don't even know how to refer it. The unrest was happening here in Minneapolis, early June, late May. Nationally the conversation was the whole city of Minneapolis is on fire. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, that's absolutely not the case.
That's not the case.
And I think, thankfully to like the people that were out documenting, live streaming, and sharing that the reality around what was occurring out here was absolutely really important. And, that goes into like conversation about like the need for independent media and then the rise of it and things like that.
It's so important. Like, national news sources don't have everybody's best interests at heart all the time. I'm not even going to be like one group is better than the other or whatever. Like a lot of it is just sensationalism. Mm-hmm. That's what it's designed to do. Ever since they put advertising on news shows, that was the big mistake. And that happened before any of us were born. Mm-hmm. The moment they put advertising in news, it became something that they needed you to watch in order for them to make the money they needed to make.
To run their show, they need that advertising.
So then they're like, well, how do we get people to watch? Well, what's sexy? Fires are sexy. Violence is sexy. Car crashes and people getting beat up and anger and big headlines. Those are sexy. That will catch someone's attention, even if it's for 5 minutes before we show them an ad for Cheerios. Like, that's what they really need. It's evolved past them. It's not even something they can stop at this point.
Because now we look at like the big tech and social media companies that are playing the same game and profiting almost the same way as that profit model, but now it's just like it knows way more. It's more targetable. It's become like it's turning into a tool, especially around elections, of like social engineering. And I can't imagine the way the United States tries to infiltrate other countries' elections the way that we're...
Oh, well, we've just done a lot, bro. The United States have done a lot in other people's elections.
Oh, absolutely. I just mean from the information standpoint, though, specifically, because the amount of misinformation and alternative facts that we're seeing in the United States right now, like, it has me, like, wondering, we look at, like Bolivia or Venezuela or even Chile, and we look at these different, cases or just foreign, I guess, situations that are occurring that, aren't really being covered here, but there's something kind of fishy and under the table going on. Yeah. We know the United States has specific interests of resources in that country, so if they can put someone in position of control that is more easily manipulated and will play their game with them, then, like, of course,
we've toppled entire regimes off of emails, faxes. You know what I mean? Like, we want the world to run a certain type of way. America has kind of been that way since its inception. The whole reason they left is because, like, the whole reason that some of these pilgrims, these settler people left is because they didn't want to do things the way that everybody else was doing them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The idea of changing the world to better suit our interests, and by our, I mean their interests, is part of America's blood. You can talk about all the Constitution stuff in the land of the free as much as we want, but like at the heart of it, manifest destiny has always been United States lifeblood. And it just looks a lot less like taking land and murdering people in smallpox blankets. Mm-hmm. And now it turns into just like making deals and, handshakes behind so-and-so and, a little bit of a news story here, a little bit of news story there, a little bit of misinformation, here, this, that, and the third. And then so-and-so's not present over there anymore. And we have someone that we like over there. Mm-hmm. That's just the reality.
And we can mine the lithium to build our new batteries.
Yeah, that's just how it works.
And it's, American imperialism definitely looks interesting, I think, but there's a conversation to be had, whereas like, America has absolutely done some shady, like despicable things.
Yep.
Like that, I don't think that can be overstated. But then we look at like the efforts of the other superpowers of the world. Mm-hmm. If the United States wasn't active in that same way, how far would like the reach of the China Communist Party have reached?
We have no idea. That's the thing. As long as humans run the world, it will be as such. Is that powers trying to expand farther than they were the day before? It's just it's human nature. Not to say that humans are naturally good or naturally bad. It's just human nature to expand, and some people will do that at the expense of others. Some people will do that for others, and some people will do that because they're scared of others. Right now, a lot of what America's rhetoric is, especially if you listen to this particular president, again, not trying to be particularly political, but the concept is a lot of his rhetoric is we must be great because if we're not, then these people will come and take what we have. Mm-hmm. It's not even let's be great because I have a bunch of great ideas that I want to do. You know what I mean?
That's not what you wish it would be.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It'd be one thing. It's like, oh, man, we got to make it great because I want to build all these. I want to build flying cars. I'm going to build this pill, and you eat it, and you can, like, learn all these languages. But we need to have, all this stuff in order for me to do that. So let's get all that stuff. That's a different type of manifest destiny. Mm-hmm. Other than we have to make sure that everybody is like us. We can only like the people we like. We can only eat the foods that we eat. They can only speak the languages that we speak, because if they don't, then we won't have what we have. That comes out of a poverty spirit. That comes out of a desperation and like Gollum, like Smeagol, like intensity of holding on to the one thing that you think makes you special. And if that's your greatness, then you will bite off the finger of anyone who tries to put on greatness for themselves, whether that be minority people, whether that be another country, whether that be immigrants trying to have the same advantages that you got,
or an entire working class.
I will bite off your finger if you think you will be more special than me. Mm-hmm. And that is, again, working on being emotionally stronger, letting other people shine, letting other people thrive, and not seeing it as a weakness of yourself, but seeing it as a celebration of other people's hard work and achievement, or even just like luck. It's okay.
I think what you just described is in some ways what people would describe as, some people use this term to describe what we're experiencing right now as like the great humbling.
Ooh, right? I haven't heard that, but I like that a lot.
And I've heard that a couple of times now, and it seems like what you just described is almost hand in hand with that. As into, we don't have to make someone else suffer in order for us to be great. Mm-hmm. We can build our foundation and become great ourselves while supporting others becoming great also. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not a me go up and you can't.
Yeah, you have to sit over here. You have to. Well, capitalism is built off that. That's the thing that I feel like some people don't always get, is that capitalism is based on winners and losers. It needs winners and losers to thrive. Mm-hmm. If everybody was a winner, well, then how can I
That's how, I mean, if we are true capitalism, that's how our government fucks up currently, by bailing out these giant corporations and airlines, because if that's a social program, that's socialism, that's corporate welfare.
Exactly.
If we're gonna allow the rich and the elite to
talk to them,
take this government money, when we're supposed to be capitalism, and like you just said, in capitalism there's supposed to be winners and losers, and if we keep bailing out the losers, we're no longer capitalists. I don't understand what really, like, I just don't understand it. It's a fucking conundrum.
It is. That's what it is. Because we're not truly capitalists. We're capitalists when it suits the people who are at the top, and we're socialists when they need it. That's always been the situation. You know what I mean? Ever since they,
I feel like that's worth repeating.
Yeah, we're capitalists when it suits the people at the top, and we're socialists when they need it. Because that's how it's been since we never got 40 acres and a mule. Like the idea that everybody can get the thing isn't part of who we are. It's never been a part of who we are ever. They say it is because it allows them to play that way, but it's not the same.
So what do we do about money? Because money just sucks.
It does suck.
Right?
I'll take everybody's.
To me,
I'll take yours if you don't want. You can send it to me. No, I understand what you're saying.
It's a made up thing.
Yeah,
it's
a piece of
I'll
paper.
agree. It's absolutely necessary in our current state of what this world is.
I'll take all of it. If you would like to give it to me, I'll take it.
But it's also a tool of oppression.
Yes.
Right. And I think that, one, the word oppression is often loaded. I think we need to broaden how we use that word, because just as a working class and below in the United States, you're oppressed. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. We should have more spending power on the market just by working 40 hours a week. We should have a livable wage. We should have access to things that currency used to be, and this is going to get weird for some of you guys listening. Yeah, I also do, hip hop, and I also do like cartoons and stuff. But we'll get to there too. This is just about to get some more stuff. Money used to be based around the labor you could physically produce, and the moment we got away from that, it was the moment where the people with the highest capacity to exploit people took and ran. Because before, when we were on a barter system, or when we were on a what you could produce is what you got system, it was your labor. And one of the reasons why the black American was so disenfranchised was because their labor was taken and they got nothing from it. They took their labor from you, and then they made them sharecroppers, which took their labor from them, because you couldn't sell something at the market that you didn't have. Now we can do that, but before we couldn't. If you didn't have 50 bales of hay, you couldn't sell 50 bales of hay. You could only sell what you could physically produce. And so they would buy people to do it for them, and then they could produce a bunch because they didn't treat them like humans. They treated them like machines. And when they built machines, they didn't really need the humans anymore. They just kicked them out, but they didn't give them anything from their labor, because they could produce 50 bales of all the things because they've been doing it this whole time. But now they don't need them anymore, because now they can have a machine do it and do X, Y, Z. And as soon as it became off of not what you could produce, but what you could have someone else produce for you, and the labor would stack, because your child didn't have to make 50 bales of hay. Why should they? I have already made 100 bales of hay off of these slaves, so I'm going to give them more money. That's North and South. That's all over the place. People want to pretend like slaves were just in the South, but that's not the case. So it's like, it was everywhere. And as soon as we got off of that, and then we were on gold. Then as America, as a system, we could only have as much money as we had physical gold in the country. And we could only have physical gold if someone went out and got it. But then we decided to just go off credit. A credit that was something that people decided we had and made based on the potential of what we could do and could make. And once that started happening, it was a wrap. Because you can make up any number. Every country in the world is in debt to some other country for some amount of money. There is no real money out there. No country in the world that trades on the world stage has a positive balance.
That's insane.
That is insane.
Think about that. Like, it's not like oh, people say like, oh, America's $70 billion in debt. And what has it done? Has anyone swooped in and started changing the streets and you know what I mean? Like locking the doors from you, turn the electricity off, put an eviction notice on the country, tell everybody to get out? No. Everybody's in debt because it's fake. It's not real. It's not based on anything physical. It's not based on anything tangible. And that's how they can get y'all.
So I'm thinking like future right now. And at one point there was no need for slaves. They had machines that could handle the labor that the slaves were producing. There's no need for slaves now, and we're not going to compensate you.
No.
Looking into the future, when we have, or not we, when these elitists and these oligarchs and these just people that kind of pull the strings in our current state of society, when there is no longer a need for a working class, what happens?
Yo, you see the Terminator?
Yeah.
You see the Terminator? They show you the Terminator that the machines control everything. Everybody's like getting killed while all the humans are huddling in caves and whatnot. I think what the Terminator is what is below the streets on the Jetsons. You watched the Jetsons before?
Just a little bit.
The cartoon, the Jetsons. The Jetsons, everyone's flying around in these like super cars, and they're like all the, like it's this fancy, nice world, but you never see what's below. You never see what's below the clouds.
Yeah.
I think that's what happens. I think what happens is once they have machines that'll do the stuff that we need, that the working class does, they don't have to pay them. They don't have to stop what they're doing. They can just like they don't complain. They never have an issue. It'll just be like cloud people up in the clouds with their fully automated lives, and they never need to deal with another human being unless they want to. And then below the cloud line, where all the dirt and muck and grime, it'll be all the mistakes, all the prototypes that don't work, everybody with sickness, and they won't have to see us anymore, because a lot of rich people still have to see the other people when they park their valet, when they
that's part of the mass eviction from LA and California right now is these wealthy ass people are like, I don't want to see homeless people. I'm moving, I'm gonna go somewhere more rural where and
they just do it. And now because we're getting connected more and more in ways that doesn't actually require you to be in the same room with anybody, we're going into VR. There's a VR bar. So me and my fiance, we went to Amsterdam, and in Amsterdam they had a VR bar. You could sit down in the bar, you put the little headset on, and it would take you to this massive super bar, and you could sit with anybody in any of these bars, and they were all across different places.
One,
it's super dope.
Yeah,
it sounds super dope.
I'm thinking two things. One, that's cool as fuck.
Yeah,
but two, it's scary as fuck too, because it's ushering in this alternate version of reality.
Then you don't need anybody.
And already with like this mental health crisis, where it feels like people are desperate for an escape from their current reality, like VR might be something that can be really cool and really useful, but I'm kind of worried for, when it becomes widely available on a consumer basis and people are spending more time in virtual reality than they are.
That's what the movie Surrogates, where you have like the robot bodies.
Yeah, with
Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis
in his robot body, and they would run around, and his wife never wanted to be in her real body. She only wanted to be in her robot body because it was beautiful and never age. And But real talk, that's what will happen, because when the middle class is no longer needed, when the working class is no longer needed because they have, not to say, when they have machines, but really, honestly, think about it. When they don't need people to bag their groceries anymore, they won't have them there.
Absolutely.
They just won't. The only time they'll have them there is if they want to do the purge or something gross. Like, you'll have the people who run stuff, the beautiful people that entertain them, and that's it.
And I'm a cautious optimist. I just learned that term recently, and I think it suits me well. Not learned it. I just decided to put the words together.
No, that's good.
But I think, for me, in the current state the current lens that I view the world out of right now is somewhat worried for the near future and the the next quarter of my lifetime, because it's awfully concerning that like this coronavirus pandemic and all these regulations that we've kind of just let settle in at this point, and the rise in people living based off of alternative facts because they're living within certain information ecosystems that are different from even
echo chambers.
Even
man.
like they could live in an apartment and their neighbor, like they could knock and be within a foot of one another, and they could be living in two completely different realities.
Exactly.
It's somewhat scary to see the rise in fortunes in that top 1%. You see Jeff Bezos' wealth just kind of taking off.
We will never be as rich as Jeff Bezos, and not that that's a bad thing, and not because we don't work hard, not because we're not talented, or not because of anything like that. It's because there's never a reset. The true spirit of capitalism is that everybody starts at the same spot, but there's never a reset. If Jeff Bezos wanted to give, I don't even know if he has children, but if he had a child, that child will be richer than us forever. Any of our children.
He got divorced and lost half of his wealth,
and still
both him and his ex-wife
and his
were
ex-wife,
in the top, 10 most wealthy people
his ex-wife, anybody that she's with, it'll be richer than anybody that we'll know forever. And their kids will be richer than our kids and our kids' kids and their kids' kids, and there's never a return to the starting block. And that's why capitalism isn't real, at least not here, not in practice. It can't be unless we're going to do something which people want to do, something which I don't think anybody would want to do. And I'm not trying, this is more of a joke, I'm not trying to be serious, but like you give up your kids and you put them in like the Divergent box or something, and everyone's got to start at zero, and no one's willing to do that because we love our families, we love our friends, and if we worked hard, we want to give people stuff.
And it seems like an absolutely common theme where like your parents, all they want to do is provide their kids with a better life than what they had, right?
Exactly. Which is why it doesn't work. Pure capitalism can't work unless we started everybody back at zero every certain amount of time, and when no one's even proposing to do that. So it's like, and that's where we talk about the alternative facts. Again, not to keep harping on this, but I think it's really important. That is a symptom of being emotionally weak. Before there was one source of news, the news. You had a news outlet, and they would tell you the facts. And if you didn't like the facts, you didn't have to like them. They just were. If you didn't like that such and such a person was saying such a thing, well, deal with it. Because they did say that, and this is what it is. But eventually, people stopped wanting to feel conflicted or challenged. So then they made different news programs that would tell you things in a way that you would like. And slowly but surely, people got emotionally weaker because they would hear something that they didn't like and would no longer watch that news station. And then they would listen to the news station that would tell them the things that they already believed and already cared about and already liked. And then that's all they would listen to. And then they would atrophy. When the astronauts used to go up in space before they created all the different things up on the space shuttle, their muscles would atrophy because they didn't use them. They'd be in wheelchairs. They'd be floating around. There was no gravity. There was no pressure on them. There was literally just weightlessness. Everything was easy. You could lift 1,000 pounds. You could lift a pencil, and it'd be the same thing because you're not really using your muscles. There's no gravity, and that's what happened. That's what's happened to all of us. I say all of us, as myself included.
Definitely.
We're
not being challenged,
and we've actively lost our emotional muscle mass. So that's why we have news stations that tell us exactly what we want to hear.
Do you think it's by design?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's easier to control the masses when everybody just has certain things they listen to. You know what I mean? Like, hey,
divide and conquer.
Yeah. Well, our nation's always been on two different paths of people. There's always been, hey, let's not kill all the Native Americans who live here and the people that decided to do that. You know what I mean? And then there were the people who thought enough of that to try and fight for those people, and they all usually died. And the ones that didn't care enough about that to really make a stink about it, they just were like, oh, well, that's not right. And that expanded our country to where it is today. There were the white folks that didn't whip their slaves so much, and the ones that did a lot. Our nation has been filled with a divide ever since its inception. But the idea that we could divide it in such a way that people you could read 2 news articles about the same thing, but depending on the source, get completely different facts about what happened. Like completely different facts about what happened I think that's new. And I think it's new on purpose.
I think a couple things. One, I think it is in part by design, because a divided nation is more easily controlled and susceptible to influence. But also the point in time that we're at with technology is interesting, because it's almost human nature to want to make things easier for ourselves, right? And we're at this point in time where, everything is on a general basis, everything can be done like so easily. Yeah. And we're not being challenged. There's not that standard adversity that, in most of human history and experience, people were faced with, that we genetically evolved with that adversity that isn't so apparent. It's not so in your face in today's day and age. Not that people don't face adversity. We absolutely face sure adversity. But we're less capable of dealing with it, I think, because we have things that are handled and taken care of so easily.
I mean, a lot of the adversity that people face is because of other people's weakness. There was a time that we had adversity just based off the elements. We had adversity based off of where we physically were. You know what I mean? Like, humans evolved. If people have different ways about where humans came from, that's a whole other different conversation. But humans evolved. I'm going to just say it like this: humans evolved to use tools to get past the adversity of things being harder to eat. And then once that tool was no longer helpful, it became new tools, and we've been doing that exponentially until here we are today. We have different kind of cameras and different new phone apps because it was easier and better than the last phone app we had. The same phone will do the same thing, but it's a little bit easier than the last time we had a different phone. The phones are bigger and smaller, bigger and smaller, bigger and smaller, depending on what we feel is going to be easier. Those things are not the adversities that most people face anymore. We don't face most people I hate saying developed, and I know there's probably a better word to say than that, but most people in like the first world people, those adversities you find are usually because of other people's weakness. They don't want to have less, so you can't have more, and they will put things in the way of you in order for you to have a tougher time getting to where they are. And that's the adversity you find. A lot of and so we see that in America based off redlining. We see that based off of where people have been forced to live, what food they've been forced to eat,
the way we approach addiction,
and homelessness and like mental health, like we were saying before. Like all of these things, that's adversities, but those aren't adversities that are found in nature. Those are adversities that are inflicted upon people by other people who don't want them to get there. There are still people who are finding trouble finding clean water, and if you think I'm talking about a third world country, I'm not. And that adversity in our nation is due to other people not wanting people to have what they have, not wanting to have to work harder, not wanting to have to strive, not wanting to feel the guilt they feel about not doing those things. And I will say this, and I've learned since even releasing my new album, I've learned recently that I need to just start saying stuff, even if it's not popular. You know, like a lot of times you're a young artist, you gotta toe the line. You know what I mean? You want to say stuff that's true, but you don't want to ruffle any feathers. But
that's hindering them.
Yeah, but in the reality is we don't grow that way. So, like, a lot of people aren't emotionally strong, and a lot of those people who aren't emotionally strong are people who can't forgive. And because they can't forgive, people are forever branded by their worst mistakes. And because of that, people are more willing to hold on to those wrong views because that guilt that's inside them can't handle that brand that they know they'll receive. And it's easier to stay the guillotine if you never get in it. So a lot of these people right now, we see that right now. You notice how Trump flags are always bigger than Biden flags?
Yeah.
You notice how these people are just like out here going crazy. They'll like paint their whole house or whatever. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's because they're doubling down. They're leaning into the skid. They're turning into the skid because they know if they go like, hey, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. A lot of people aren't going to give them any grace for that because they're not emotionally strong enough to handle having to forgive somebody who did them wrong. So then you have these people who are like, well, if I'm not going to get forgiven, because they're weak too, so they're not going to just take that. So why would I do that? Well, I'm just going to stay with these people, even though I know inside I feel that guilt. I understand what I'm saying is wrong. But inside of me, and that's why they get their faces, you see it in their faces, they twist and they're angry and they sneer and they point, and it's all about these other people because they're not strong enough to deal with that guilt, and definitely not strong enough to deal with the lack of forgiveness that comes from turning sides. To put it in a more fun way, because that's what I do. I'm a fun guy. Power Rangers. The Green Ranger beat them up for episode after episode. Evil Tommy Oliver beat them up episode after episode after episode. But he wasn't evil. There was another power at play. Someone who wanted to rule the world that pitted this talented individual with hopes and dreams against the rest of this team of diverse youths with attitude. When he finally broke free of that curse, they embraced him, and Tommy Oliver got to be a part of the Power Rangers. The Green Ranger got to be a part of the Power Rangers. And when that power he was using became too toxic for even him, he got to change into the White Ranger and still be a part of the team. We need to take a lesson from the Power Rangers.
I feel it.
We need to take a lesson from the Power Rangers. I know that's not super like popular all the time. We want to be like F these people forever, and that is a way you can be. And if you're not there yet, feel free to continue on that.
But that doesn't push humanity forward.
Feel free to do what you need to do in order to get you through the day. But honestly, if we want to get better as a people, sometimes it requires us to be like, I'm glad you made this decision. I'm glad you've made it. Like, we're not even gonna talk about that. Mm-hmm. We're not even gonna talk about that. I understand. You understand what happened? You understand what's going on? Cool. Come on. Let me teach you. Let me bring you in. Let me have you be there. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to forget. You have to remember. Like, it's just forgiving though. People want to say forgive and forget. No, you can remember. That's fine. You can remember, so it doesn't. So if you see signs, you can be like, oh, hey, this looks like what you were doing before. But you can forgive. And once you're emotionally strong enough to forgive, then people will have an incentive to give it up and expose their guilt so that forgiveness can soothe that, and they can be better people.
So forgiveness comes first. An openness and a willingness.
A willingness to forgive. You can't forgive somebody that doesn't want to be forgiven.
Right.
That's there are people that just don't want your forgiveness. They don't give a crap.
But it is liberating to still forgive those people.
Yeah.
I've had that experience myself where I know a person isn't in a place to accept my forgiveness or even change their ways that I'm forgiving them for. But I've been liberated from holding on to that resentment because I'm like, and it comes from a sense of understanding of being like, okay, I understand why you are doing the things that you're doing and why from your perspective the things that you're doing are the rational thing to do, although they affect me negatively or they've had this traumatic effect on my life. I'm going to forgive you to free myself from holding on to that resentment, right?
And just like the Power Rangers, I tell you, like forgiveness, forgiveness or people admitting that they're wrong, like that requires a change in action. The Power Rangers wanted to help Tommy, but they weren't going to let themselves get their butts kicked. They're going to try, to not die. They're going to try to not get slashed by the dragon dagger. They're going to try their best. You know what I mean? They want to protect Angel Grove. They want to protect the people they care about and they love. And the Green Ranger stands in the way of that. So they're going to make sure that this person doesn't hurt people. But once he stopped beating them up, they didn't continue to beat him up. And that's the difference. Forgiveness, like, you can forgive people ahead of time. And you can forgive people ahead of time while still fighting to dismantle the things that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And not taking hits, not getting yourself beat up. Not like, you don't have to get beat up in order to forgive somebody. You don't have to martyr yourself to forgive somebody. However, what that does require you to do is when they take the actions required to rid themselves of that guilt and shame, that your forgiveness meets them where they're at there. Their actions need to change in order for forgiveness to happen. You can't just say, I'm sorry, and do the same thing you did before, because then you're not really sorry. Mm-hmm. You're sorry you're feeling bad. And yeah, like, okay, like that, no one wants to feel negative. But being truly apologetic requires a change in action. And once that change in action is given, it needs to be met with forgiveness and reassurance and help in order to work. And in every instance, there's nuances to every single instance of these things. You know, some people just aren't there, and that's okay. That's all right. And you don't have to be someone's best friend in order to forgive them. Mm-hmm. You don't have to hang out with them all the time.
You can forgive someone and still cut them out of your life.
100%. That is, and sometimes that's the healthy thing to do, because it just is better that way. Two people just don't mesh. It's like oil and water. Sometimes it just doesn't happen.
I've just heard, you know, like, holding on to a grudge is like holding on to a ball of fire and expecting someone else to get burnt.
Yeah.
Right. Like that holding on to that resentment is more damaging to the individual holding on to it than it is the person that they resent. Yeah. Depending on the situation. Like you said, there is nuance to it.
There's nuance to it. Yeah. But the idea, if we stopped, one of the things, this is a good example for this. I talked to my partner, and one of the things that I say to them is, don't make plans as if you are going to fail. Assume you'll succeed and allow for other people to have grace when you don't. It's this thing of like, oh, well, if I don't do it, don't get mad at me. That's not what you need to say. You say, I will try my best. And know that and allow them to meet you with grace. So when I talk about that, when I say, it's not going to cover every single instances. So you can comment in the comments or whatever. You could type up something that'll be an exception to what everything I just said. That's fine. You could find that. There will always be that in every instance dealing with people. But the idea is, if we don't do anything because there is an instance where it doesn't work, we will never do anything. We don't have firefighters because they're 100% successful at everything they do. We create firefighters because fires are dangerous if they're not controlled. And we need something to come out and calm the blaze and get people out of there when they need to be. And they don't have to be 100% successful in order to be the right thing to have. This new mentality of forgiveness and grace doesn't have to be 100% across the board for every single instance of every single thing, and no one can ever do anything wrong, and oh, what about Hitler? Like, let's just try it across the board as best we can and deal with the instances when they come up, as opposed to try and fix every single hole before we start. Because right now we're a lot of the approach with like fixing these holes is like a Band-Aid approach. It's just like, I'm just thinking broadly on like our current state of society. Like when we try to address like addiction, we just throw people in prisons. Yeah, private prisons at that. Private prisons, which are the devil, by the way.
And it's just a Band-Aid solution to a restructuring level of a problem.
Real talk.
So I feel like we got good insight into.
Yeah, we talked a lot about some deep stuff.
Just who Matt Allen is.
It's me.
Who's Nur-D?
Nur-D is all that stuff too, but there's a lot more cartoon references in it. There's a lot more pro wrestling terminology and stuff. Honestly, I've been learning as I've been. This is my 30th birthday. Here I am. I'm learning that Nur-D is me. Is everything that I talk about. It's just I try to get it out in a way that people can digest. That's a little bit more fun, or catchy, or memeable, or whatever you want to call it in this day and age, so people can understand some of these big things. Nur-D is professional wrestling, comic books, TV shows, movies, but he's also body positivity. He's male body positivity specifically. He's social justice. He's empowerment for Black and brown Americans. He's reconciliation for Black, brown, white Americans, and all the people in between. He is depression and mental health. He is a lot of different things. So Nur-D is basically the vehicle in which I can say all the stuff that I just said with you in a more commercially acceptable way. And before 38th dropped, it was really interesting for me. I never felt like I wasn't being myself, but I definitely felt there were some things I wasn't talking about in any real capacity. You know what I mean? Nur-D, I'd be the first one out, running through tear gas to help people, but it wasn't in my music at all. You know what I mean? You wouldn't know. And one of the reasons why I made 38th.
I'll counter that though.
Hit me.
I think that I just by listening to your music, I have an understanding for the type of person that you are, based on the way you decide to present the ideas that you're thinking about in your music. You seem to, especially before 38th, it seemed like there was like graciousness, there was inclusivity. There's a lot of characteristics that I think I could see in you that would make me assume you'd be the type of person to run into tear gas and save somebody.
I think most people, people who have told me, they're like, man, I know, I felt that through the thing, and I would agree with that, and that's awesome. I'm glad that came through. One of the things I said is that I wanted, if I were to die before that thing came out, I didn't want anybody to be like, I wonder what he would have said about blank. One of the things that, again, I'm very unabashedly Christian. I talk about that all the time. But one of the things that has always frustrated me about the religion that I subscribe to is that people tend to talk about what Jesus would have said about blank, even though he never talked about it. And they try to compartmentalize other things he said and other things he might have done, and maybe this is how I feel about that, or how I'm feeling like this and that and the other thing. And it's impossible to get a person's life into every single opinion that might come up in a person's life. That being said, I didn't want to leave any mysteries. I don't want to leave no mysteries. The best I can, if there's something important to me, I want to make sure that it's clear. And you don't have to piece it together, I will tell you. 100%. But that way later on, when someone says, oh, well, I think you would have been like XYZ. They do that with Martin Luther King Jr. every Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Every single time. Both people on MSNBC and Fox News will talk about how Martin Luther King Jr. would have been about the thing that they're pushing that day. And I was like, yo, I know that it still might happen when I die, whatever reason, if people even care what I thought when I die. But I want to make sure that
it's crystal clear.
The things that are important to me, I can be like, yo, I said this. This is what I said.
So you're not looking from above I should have responded to this thing.
No.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't know some of the things you don't know. But what did Nur-D say about human and alien relationships? There's no aliens right now.
Do you have a song about it?
I'm going to make one.
All right.
I'm going to make a song about human alien races called Mass Effect, and it's going to be all about loving who you love. If you want to love Liara Tassoni, feel free, my man, or my lady, or my person. Feel free. I appreciate you taking the time to wonder what I had to think. Nur-D is pro alien relationships, as long as those aliens are not going to eat you or harvest you in any kind of way, unless that is a consensual act. Even still, I'd suggest not doing that.
If they can convince me that it's of benefit to the the greatness of the universe, and they can confirm for me that there is some like afterlife for me to thrive in.
As long as it's not coerced,
you can go ahead and
it's not coerced or mind controlled into it, and they express the benefit of it. There's a race in Dungeons and Dragons, which is an ooze-like race. They're semi-ooze, and they're benevolent creatures, and they come onto planets and they help them with their problems, and they say, hey, by the way, we're a hive mind. We're all one. We don't have any wars. We don't have any things.
We are one.
Yeah, we are
That's
one.
The name of the
like we're a thing. Would you like to be a part of it? Like you definitely can hear the benefits. They won't say there's any cons, but they'll be like, here's the benefits. Here you go. And so if an alien race was cool and was like, hey, would you like to do that? No. Okay, bye. Like that's the kind of people we'd hope to run into.
Right.
With our galactic karma, though.
It depends. I think it's difficult to try and I think we're absolutely projecting our human experience on what aliens we might encounter.
Yes.
But the possibilities absolutely are endless.
It's 50-50 either way. We'll either get a really nice super it's infinite. You can't say one thing will happen and one thing won't happen. All I'm saying is that if karma's a thing, well, not even karma, because I know karma's like a weird sentence. Like it means different things and how we use it. But if reaping what you sow is real, I hope aliens don't find the human race. Not until we get our stuff figured out.
Right. And do you think optimistically we're moving towards like a more passionate, inclusive, like, I've described it this way before, where like it's like this point in time where humans are at least in Western culture, we're like understanding that we can be more productive and less parasitic. Yeah. We, instead of sucking the life out of the planet, hopefully in our future, of the human race, we just become regenerative and supportive and a part of, as opposed to thinking of ourselves as something separate from that tree or that deer.
Yeah, this is where we go back to the conversation about VR, right? This is where it could be used positively. Me and my friends, we were talking about this the other day. We said, what if we just did zoos in VR?
That'd be sick.
Why do we have to have animals in these cages when we can simulate the same animal? The kids already can't touch a polar bear. The kids already can't touch a tiger. They're not allowed to physically be in the space with them. They will be eaten. So why not just take these kids, stick them in a room no bigger than this? They just stand there. You know what I mean?
And they
can be on the savannah. You can turn the heat up in the room. You can turn the cold down in the room. You can make it an experience for them.
You can make them actually interact with the animals.
You would take up less space.
You get like a lion that like walks by you, just brushes past your arm, and you got like just brush them with something.
Yeah, the kids would be like, "Oh,
that would be insane."
Why not?
I would appreciate that way more than our current zoo experience.
Because zoos have a sleepy animals that don't want to deal with you and are not. And then what you could do is you can use those spaces. First of all, you can like we consume a lot less resources that way. Just like general. But then you can use that place for actual conservation for the actual animals that need to be rehabilitated before they get back. Because that's originally what they say things is about.
Right.
But it's like. There is a version of our society that can move into the world. In a better space using the technology and the ingenuity that we have. That we can have the things that we liked about the planet Earth without having to destroy it to get it. You want a fancy, crazy space, you can build it virtually, or we can 3D print it in a way that isn't going to take up all the wood that we have on the planet and all the water that we have on the planet. We can do that. There's a version of us, humans, that does that, but it would require a desire to not hurt, to take the harder way. It would require us it would be harder to invest in that and dismantle what we have than it would be to just keep going with the way we're going, even though it's not sustainable, because we're finite beings. And as long as we keep thinking of ourselves as finite beings, then who cares?
Do you feel that you Matt Allen, are you finite?
Nah.
Right.
Nah.
This is more so just your physical vessel.
Yeah.
That's finite.
I'm infinite. I'm going to be around Like I am, and I will be, that is what it is. That's a whole theological statement. It's a whole big thing. But as far as my mentality goes, I will be, and my actions have ripples that will affect everything going forward. My grandfather lived a life so that I could live a better one. He is alive because I am alive. And even if I'm not literally immortal, as in my soul is literally immortal and will live on after my body dies, but my actions will affect other people. They will affect my loved ones. They'll affect my family, and my actions will affect their life. And thus I continue to live and I continue to be. And thus I have to think about the world in terms of, I'm going to be around here for a very long time. I might as well clean up the place as opposed to destroy it. If you were locked in an apartment if someone told you they were going to lock you in an apartment for 3 years, you'd probably try to keep that apartment clean as best you can, because you have to live in it. Mm-hmm. If you could leave whenever you want, you just throw your clothes wherever and you just boop and you walk out. Boop, who cares? You know what I mean? Because I can leave, I can come back. I'm not going to stay in this room. That's the planet. I don't think of myself and my time here on this planet as something that is finite, even though it might be literally, tangibly. I'm going to be according to time and according to just like how bodies work. But like, I plan on trying to do my best. I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. You're going to see me later on in life. I'm going to be drinking out of a styrofoam cup at some point, and you're going to be like, but he said. What I'm telling you, though, is that I'm trying my best to make actions, vote, make my politics, make my life, make my actions about keeping the world sustained for past when my body is out of here.
I think one of the ripples that you will have affected long term is the clean hip hop movement.
Yeah.
I love that because, I mean, first and foremost, I know personally I swear way too fucking much, and my curse words are often just filler words for something that I could have articulated more intelligibly or with a different, like a proper use of words. They're just a shortcut oftentimes. And I think by not having curse words for the most part in your music is powerful. It's I think it's useful. It's useful in that when there's more to be. I get more out of listening to your music when you're not using just filler words, like trying to fill a couple syllables. You need to actually put something substantive there in its place of what might have been, a fuck you or a nigga or whatever it is. There's actually something that has meaning there. It's
purposeful. I do it. There's multiple reasons why I do it. Like, first of all, I always, and I'm trying to say this more often, is that like swearing is not an indication of morality. People, some of the best people I know curse like sailors, but they're the kindest, sweetest, gentlest, most ready to help, most selfless people that I know. So swearing is not a market for morality. People say like, "Oh, your clean music is better because it's clean." It's like, well, if I did a clean song about how I beat up my spouse, I never used the B word, I never did anything like that, would it still be better? No. People can use like, F white supremacy in a song. That's a good sentiment. It's just a harder one for people to hear because that word carries with it emotional weight right off the bat. It is harsh. We have decided as a society that word has a negative and harsh connotation, and it is reserved for cursing. That's why we call it curse. Yeah. That's why
it has a positive connotation.
It does. It can. You definitely can do it positively.
Hey, you know what I'm saying?
You know what I'm saying? We do it out here. But that being said, it's important. It's important to state that, like I don't want there to be any hindrance to people hearing the message that I have to say. So if you don't like curse words, You won't find it. You won't find any. I might say damn from time to time in my music. That's just, it is what it is. But you won't hear any of the big, bad, scary words in my music, specifically because I don't want that to be a hindrance for you.
Okay.
I don't want that to be a hindrance for you. I'm telling you something that I feel like you need to know. And if that's going to be a problem for you, I just won't put it in there. Some people don't do that. Some people don't care about that part of your listening experience, and they don't have to. They have no responsibility for you to take their art any certain type of way. I just choose to. That's what I like to do. And also, as a business move, it's a lot easier to do. You don't have to make radio edits for people. You can tell them
you just
it's
send
clean.
them, it's clean. You're good. You can put it on playlists in the ice cream shop.
Yeah, you can put it anywhere. And I can.
Little kids can be dancing to it in their dance recitals.
Exactly right. You never have to worry about it. I've done shows. I've done shows all over the place. For like, one of my first shows was up above. I know we don't have a crazy amount of time.
Yeah,
but like,
I'm not in a rush.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I have other places I gotta run.
You gotta move around.
But I will say this: that I've been able to play in front of so many different audiences, both corporate and not, both the street and the boardroom, because of how I've decided to create my music. It is a choice. It's not the easiest choice in the world. It requires thought and like conscious effort all the time, and you don't have to do it. Nobody has to do it if they don't want to. It's just a way to do it that's different and would require a little bit of extra effort on your lyrics and crafting. And if your craft is something that you like to be challenged in, I suggest trying it. Just do a project. I challenge every artist out there that's currently not doing it. Do an entire project. Do 10 songs without saying a single curse word, and just to see if you can.
I'm gonna take that challenge on myself and produce a podcast without a curse word.
There you go. Just like this, and to see where you're at. Mm-hmm. And again, just like any addiction, like this is like any addiction. Like maybe it's something that you didn't realize that you couldn't do, and then if it becomes something that you need to do and not something that you choose to do, then maybe you might want to reassess how much control it has over you. Mm-hmm. That's where it comes from for me. So like if you can't do it, maybe you need to think about how much those words have an effect on you. Because I don't want to live in a world where anything decides for me what I will do or won't do. Mm-hmm. So,
and I think with that conversation, it's a good segue just because I definitely wanted to talk about 38th. Mm-hmm. But I think we're going to kind of hit it in passing here because there's one other thing that I want to talk about before we do wrap up. But in 38th, I think if you listen to it, it's pretty clear with the inspiration behind the album. Yeah. Right? There were quite a few things that stand out to me in it, but I think I personally really appreciated the language you used, the way you presented some of these ideas, and I think not using curse words in that context was very valuable because it's you can express, I think, the emotion in some of the songs more honestly, where you don't have to use a fuck as a filler word or whatever, because sometimes we use those words as an expression, but you're more like we just talked about. It's just more substantive in the way that you're expressing. It's more authentic. It's more real. It's better insight into you and the I think the community you're advocating for in the music also. There's a lot, I guess, that stood out to me, but one thing is Black Kid, White Town.
Yes.
That track. With Brandon Paulfus.
With Brandon Paulfus. Shout out to Brandon Paulfus, everybody.
I like that. And I want you to talk a little bit more about the concept around that track.
So that track has actually been sitting around in my brain for a minute. Like, it has been something that I've been really feeling and wrestling with just as a Black artist coming from Rosemont, Minnesota. It's just been something that I felt like I've always wanted to talk about. Again, it's that conversation of like, well, does Nur-D even talk about that stuff? And so this was a vessel for me to really get it together because it really came to a head in this time, and where we're at. And the reality of Black Kid, White Town is those stories are direct from my life, like direct from Brandon's life. Like it is when I tell you that I walked into a Great Clips one time and they told me they weren't cut my hair because nobody knows how to do it. It's real.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was a real thing that I did. Like, that I had because they didn't have any barbershops in Rosemont, Minnesota. My mom had to cut my hair, and she wasn't great at it. So a lot of times my hair just got really crazy wild all the time because we didn't have the opportunity to do that. And people assume you're a certain type of way, and you're going to talk a certain type of way and act a certain type of way. And being told that you're either not black or not black enough, or you're too black, or you date somebody of a different color than you and their family has something to say about it, or your family has something to say about it, and you realize that you were in a really weird tightrope. I think Dave Chappelle talked about, when everybody was in the projects together. But when you're the only black poor kid at a upper class white school, it feels like it's only happening to you. And that's kind of a lot of what it was. Is that like, oh man, it was really cool to hang out with all these people, and I go home and I have, government cheese and government peanut butter on crackers. Not at the same time.
It might be worth a try.
Yeah, but you know what I mean?
Not with that hard ass cheese though.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the block that says cheese. Like, people don't even understand. So it's like that was my life. That was who I was. One of the lines in that was like, "We can date when my grandmother dies," was something that someone had told me in my life. Like, oh hey man, you're cute. I like you and stuff, but we couldn't date until my grandma dies because like she doesn't like black people.
Crazy.
And thinking that was something that you could just say to me. Like, it's something that's like is cool for you to do. Like, oh, hey, racism isn't a problem for me, but it is for my family, so I'm just going to let that go down. So I'm going to
abide by it and make my decisions in my life differently, even though I have these feelings for you.
And I didn't even like this person. It wasn't even like I was like, oh, I want to date you. Is it cool? No, they just came up to me out of the clear blue sky and let me know that their family would disapprove of me having romantic feelings towards them. And I was just like, cool. Thanks for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How do you like?
You don't respond to that. You just go like, "Yeah, I have that effect on old white grandmas," and just like and let it be what it is.
Like, oh, thanks. Good thing I really wanted to date you. I'm absolutely going to be holding out until your grandmother dies. In fact, I might help her speed up the process.
Let's figure a way how to get this out. Let's get this out the way. All that to say is, Black Kid, White Town. A lot of the songs on the whole album are really, really important to me, obviously. Black Kid, White Town is very unique to a particular individual, a particular type of the black experience or the brown experience or, the Asian experience. Like the concept of like you're the person in your town, the representative of this entire other situation that's above that's outside of you even, and you're trying to figure out where you fit is big.
Definitely.
And so, yeah, being in white spaces majority of my career, even being in rock and roll before I started doing hip hop and being in majority of the white spaces in my career has shaped the way I go about it. Not always for the better. Like sometimes I find myself doing things that is meant to appease other people that I didn't know I was even doing. So I'm working on that even now.
I think I wanted to talk about that track specifically just because I shared a lot of the experiences that were being talked about in that track. And it made me think, recently you had that post on Facebook where you had said something along the lines of like, I'm sick of black people feeling like they're either not black enough to be a part of the black community or too black to be a part of the white community.
Yeah.
And I definitely have shared that experience myself too. I talked about it a little bit in a recent podcast also, but that thinking about that kind of leading up to now, because I knew that post was something I wanted to bring up because it was absolutely thought provoking for me. I was thinking how like, you know what, like actually I'm not black. I'm brown. I don't understand really at this point in time, while I'm thinking about it, the identity behind identifying as black, because no person that calls himself black is black.
Yeah, not literally, not in like a literal sense. Yeah, it is a shorthand for a much deeper conversation of where we came from and where our people is. Like my grandfather on my mother's side immigrated from Jamaica. My grandmother from my mother's side immigrated from Jamaica. You know what I mean? I'm third generation American on their side. Now my father's side is American slave black, but like and my dad wasn't in my life until I was much, much older. So for me, growing up, some of the stories that I was told and the things that I knew that black people went through, the people in my family didn't know of it outside of their own physical experience. And I wasn't connected to the huge tree that was birthed from the American slavery until I was much older, you know, and that's wild, where you find yourself like, oh man, I'm kind of like in this weird nebulous space where I know that like I am connected to this in a way, but I also feel like I'm connected to a completely different tree and a completely different life. And definitely for people with mixed parentage and the concept of mixed, but like this idea of like multi-racial people, they are found in this really weird space of not being either, of not being anywhere, not like too much this, too much that. They're never here but never there. I think about my nieces who are, you know, they have white mom, black dad, and I think to myself, man, they're black girls as far as anyone else is gonna say. You know what I mean? But if they wanted to show up at, you know, Oktoberfest or whatever and be like super into that part of their heritage, it might be a problem. They might have to fight adversity because of that, and that is unfortunate. That's the way people are right now.
I'm convinced that one of like the current tools of like oppression and holding people down globally, but in this country specifically, is identity. And that's kind of where I think of you know, actually I'm not black, I'm brown, because brown is a more true identifier of who I am, as opposed to identifying with the stereotype and stigma that they or you, not you specifically, but you know, that you'd put onto like the black community. I don't identify with that specifically. I think that's a deeper thing that
there's a lot of language in there, but I think ultimately the idea of like, hey, I want to be judged off of my unique experience and not based off of this other thing that I might have not even experienced is valid. And I think a lot of people are asking for that. You know what I mean? The fact that we even are calling ourselves black at all is because it was changed in us from being human beings, from when we all could have just been that, because of people's weaknesses. Like we said before, people's weaknesses, their emotional weakness, their desire for a supremacy and validation, it put people into categories, and a lot of those categories unfortunately had to do with the color of people's skin, and that just proceeded forever. People are trying to reclaim it. I'm black and proud. I'm really happy about that, but I do know that phrase would have been wrong. Even like my grandfather never called himself black. He called himself, first of all, he called himself American, and that was it, because he was so proud of the work he did to become American that he didn't want to be called a Jamaican American. He just wanted to be called American. He wouldn't have called himself black. And then my mother's generation didn't want to be black. They wanted to be African American. They wanted to like to have that, because black was negative, and now black is positive again. You know what I mean? No, black, like black. Like that's who I am, and it'll change. Labels will change based on how people will decide to feel themselves.
The race I identify with is human.
Yeah, and if that's what you want to do, then that's take it and run with it. I always tell people, it's like, yo, know your heart, know the reality of where you're at, and that's it. If someone runs in the room and says, I'm going to kill all the black people, duck. Right. Duck. I don't care how you feel about yourself. Based on the way you perceive. Know that. Internalize how you feel. That's what we're telling telling the little black babies that are little brown skinned babies that I know as they grow up. I say, hey, like, live your truth, be who you want to be. Know that because the way you look is this way, people are going to treat you differently. But you don't have to be anything you don't want to be. But just be aware of where you're at. We understand that if someone walks in the room and says, I'm killing all the black, I'm killing all the Negroes, duck. You duck. Then we can talk about who you are later. But now there's certain times to stand up for that sort of thing, and there's certain times to not. And that's what, like, living that truth, being able to speak it, being able to be like, hey, I want to be judged on this, that's great. And I think people need to be able to say that and be able to say, this is what I'd like to be. And because we want to live in a more inclusive and understanding society, we need to be able to take that and be like, not be threatened by that as a concept, and be like, cool, how does that look for you?
I just think of broadly how it's a tool, like I kind of described. Yeah, we're wrapping up. Just how it's a tool of holding people down and oppressing. But
yeah,
with that, we're about an hour 40 minutes in. This has been a really fun conversation. We talked about a lot of different stuff.
We sure did.
I look forward to talking with you again in the near future. I'm excited to see where you go with,
check it out. Chicago Avenue, the second part is coming out in November. So be looking out for the second part of the 38th. It's called Chicago Avenue. It's coming out in November. It's going to be super dope. You can follow me at Nur-D Rocks on all social media.
Yeah, and also in the show notes, I'm going to link your TEDx Talks video too.
Thank you.
Because it's very insightful, and I think there's a lot to be gotten out of it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening this far. This is the We Are One podcast, joined today by the one and only Matt Allen, Nur-D, and deuces.
Peace.